And by morning, he was still a good ways from his final destination, so he was getting a little sleepy, as sometimes you do when you've been driving all night. He decided to stop at the next little town that he came to and park somewhere quiet so that he could get an hour or two's rest and then continue on with his journey. Well, as luck would have it, the quiet place that he chose happened to be a park by a lake, which also, he didn't know this, but happened to be the city's main jogging route. So no sooner had he settled back in his car seat and began to snooze when there came a knock on his window. He looked out through the light of dawn and he saw a jogger running in place. He rolled down his window just a little bit and said, "Yes." "Excuse me, sir," the jogger said, "do you have the time?" Well, the man looked at his watch and said, "Wait, it's 6:45. The jogger said, "Thank you," and left. Well, the exhausted man settled back in his seat once again, and it was just dozing off the second time when there was another knock on his window from another jogger. "Pardon me, sir, but could you tell me what time it is? I don't want to be late for work." Well, somewhat frustrated at this point, the man said, "It's 6:58. The jogger said thanks and left. Now, the man could see other joggers were passing by. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone else would interrupt his sleep and disturb him another time. So, to avoid the problem, he had a great idea. He took out a black marker and a piece of paper, and he made a sign and put it in the window. And the sign said this: "I do not know the time." Satisfied that this would allow him to get back to the necessary sleep he craved, he once again settled back in his comfortable leather car seat. He was just dozing off the third time when another knock came on the window. Sir, I wanted to let you know it's 7:15. Most anyone can tell me what time it is at any given moment of the day. We have so many sophisticated instruments to tell us the time. I don't wear a watch anymore. You know why? Because I have a phone that always seems to know the time when I need to find out, right? But few people pay much attention. I mean, we know what time it is of the day, but few people pay much attention to how well they spend their time each and every day. Let's pretend that I pull you aside this morning after church and I say, "I have some very good news for you." And you would say, well, preacher, what is it? What is it? I want to hear it. And I tell you that the good news is that an anonymous donor who loves you very much has decided to deposit 86,400 pennies into your bank account each and every morning starting tomorrow. And you would say, "Wow, that's amazing." And you begin to thinking, well, how much is 84,600 pennies? I mean, what are we talking about here? And for those who might be mathematically challenged, I did a little arithmetic before I came up here. That's $864 a day put into your bank account. Now, how many of you think that would be pretty good news? I could live with that. I mean, I could accept that, right?
Amen.
7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, but there's only one stipulation. You must spend all of that money the same day that you receive it. So each and every day, no balance can be carried over. Each evening, the bank must cancel whatever sum you failed to use that particular day. Now, I'm sure at that point, with a big smile, you would thank me and you would thank God for being so very, very good to you, right? Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
All right. You have time to now go home to plan your spending strategy for the rest of your life. What am I going to do with that money each and every day? And you grab a pencil and you start figuring it up. $864 times 7 equals, that's about $6,000 a week. And times 52, that's almost $315,000 a year that you have available to you if you work hard to spend it each and every day. Remember, whatever you don't spend is forfeited. You could probably spend it, but it would take some planning, wouldn't it? It would take some thought. What am I going to do? Now, the first few days would be pretty easy, right? Man, I'd be buying personal things, stuff that I want. Maybe a new TV one day, maybe a stereo system, maybe a down payment on a car or something, whatever I've wanted, and thinking, hey, I don't have to worry about that. I can pay for that, no problem. And then you would soon, though, run out of personal things that you really had to have or wanted and whatever, and you begin to think, well, how can I bless my family? Maybe I can give some of the money away each day, or maybe I can help other people, or maybe my friends, that are kind of down on their luck, maybe they could use some help and some things, and then some fun things. Maybe we'll go on I'll take a trip, or I'll take a vacation, or I'll do something. Are you all with me here?
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Turn me off. There's a point to this. And then you begin to think maybe about, what about some serious things? What about some investments that I could make? What about the needy? What about the community and their needs? And maybe, what about things of eternal value that would impact the souls of men and women for eternity? Oh, okay. Now stop right there. You're being too greedy thinking about it, right? Now, what am I really trying to say to you? Every morning, someone who loves you very, very much deposits into your bank of time 86,400 seconds, which represents 1,440 minutes, which, of course, equals 24 hours a day. Now, you've got to remember the same stipulation, though, applies as to the illustration we just used, because God gives you this amount of time for you to use each and every day. Nothing can be carried over on credit to the next day. There is no such thing, by the way, as a 26-hour day. You have to use it within the 24 hours specified, though some of us wish there were some extra hours in the day, right, at times. Listen, folks, life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want to, but you can only spend it once.
That's right. That's right.
Are we careful about the way that we are spending our allotment of seconds and minutes and hours and days and years? Do we spend our time on frivolous activities that produce no good results? Do we spend our time on things that are actually hurtful in our lives and to others around us? Or do we spend our life and our time on things that are meaningful and helpful and productive? Now notice this, that the difference between great achievement and little achievement often boils down to how people use the time that God has given to them and been allotted. And everyone receives exactly the same amount each and every day. Listen, folks, time is not a renewable resource. And we will, hear me out, we will be held accountable for how we use the time that God gave to us. We must be careful, therefore, with what we do with it. Would you look with me at Ephesians chapter 5? Verse number 15. I'll put the verse up here for you if you don't have the Word of God with you or can't look on with someone else. Here's what it says. The Apostle Paul is writing. He says, "See then that you walk circumspectly." That means carefully. That you live carefully. Not as fools. Because what do fools do? What do fools do with time? They waste it. Right? They don't use it. They let it just slip by. See, then you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. Here's our verse 16. Redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Now, in chapter 5 of Ephesians, Paul is telling us, he's informing us, he's teaching us how to live life to its fullest. How to get the greatest value out of the life that God has given to you and to me. He begins back in verse 1, and just quickly, we're not going to go back and read those verses, but in verse 1, he says that we ought to make the choice in our life. If we really want to use time properly, we need to make the choice to follow God in our life. We need to put Him first. We need to follow God in His ways like a child follows his parents. Verse 2, he says, if you want to live life to its fullest, then he says you need to learn to walk in love. That's what he teaches. To walk in loving others. In verse 3, then he teaches that we ought to, if you want to live life to its fullest, you need to avoid sin in your life. Sin's a time waster. Amen? Amen. It steals, it robs, kills, it destroys. Verses 8 and 9, he says you're to walk in goodness and holiness and truth. Verse 15, he says you're to walk in wisdom. But here in verse 16, he says we're to redeem the time, which simply means this, to make the most of every opportunity that we have in life. And that's what Paul meant when he said that we are to redeem the time because the days are evil. He's saying, in reality, seize the moment. Seize the day. Redeem the time. And that's our message this morning. And when the apostle was writing these words, the two most common words that in his language at the time, by the way, for some of you didn't know, Paul did not speak English. Never heard a word of it in his whole life. Would have understood it if he was here right now. He did speak several other languages, but one of his main language that he wrote in was a language called Greek. And in his language, he could have chosen several different words for time. There were many. The two most popular or prominent words for time that he could have used, one was a word called chronos, which speaks of minutes and seconds and days and weeks of years. We get our word chronology or chronological from that particular word. The key idea is the duration of time. And if someone were to ask you what time is it, what would you say? Or what chronos is it? You would say, well, it's about 11, 16 or 17, something like that, whatever your watch would say. Now, however, that's not the word that Paul used here in Ephesians 5 and verse 16. He didn't use the word for what time is it. Instead, he uses the Greek word kairos, which means, it's a word that means opportunity or a season or a fitting time here in life. Kairos time is a fixed and definite time or season of life. For instance, let me give you a verse in Galatians 6:9. The Bible says this, and let us not be weary in well-doing, but for in due season, that's the word kairos, in due season we shall reap if we don't faint. Now, chronos is the quality of time that we use, whereas kairos, is the quantity of time that we use, chronos is, whereas kairos is the quality of time that we use wisely. Again, if I were to ask you what chronos is it, you'd give me a minute, or you give me an hour and a minute. You would say it's 11:15. But if I were to ask you what kairos is it in your life, you might say, well, as far as the season, it's spring. As far as the time, it's morning is a kairos time. And or maybe you would say, well, preacher, it's been a very difficult time lately for me. I've gone through a lot. There's been a lot of problems. Someone shared with me this morning about them losing their husband. That's a kairos time. That's the time when it's not a moment. You can go, it happened at a certain time and it stopped happening at a certain time. It's a season. We don't know exactly sometimes when it ends. What Paul is saying, he's saying, redeem those kairos opportunities, those seasons of your life that God allows you as certain opportunities. Seize those moments and make the most out of them. That's the secret to a fulfilled life, he said. Have you ever found yourself saying something like this? Well, honey, do you remember the time when... You ever said that? I usually say no. Is your wife like that? She remembers everything, Alan, and it's like, well, maybe. I mean, sure, yeah, exactly like you remember that.
That's what they're looking for.
That's right. But no, we do remember certain times. I asked our Sunday school class, do you remember your first day of school? And all of a sudden, yeah, I don't think so. That's been too long ago. But I do remember the first child that we had bringing our baby home from the hospital. So that's a Kairos moment, right? Or you might remember the first, your first day on the job, or you might remember, the day you got married. Hopefully that was a Kairos time, and a day when you can. Again, men don't remember too much about that, but it's just kind of a whirlwind thing. But those are the moments of life. Here's what I know. Foolish people waste or squander Kairos moments in their life. They miss them. They don't take advantage of them. They let the opportunities go by. They don't respond to them. Whereas the wise man, doesn't he talk about wisdom here in verse 15? See that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as what? As wise. Wise man or woman redeems the wasted moments of their life and makes them valuable. And when we live by that kind of time, we remember that all of our hours, all of our days, all of our weeks, all of our years have been given to us by the Lord. Amen. To use profitably. Now let's look more closely at what God has to say about the wise use of time, and allow me to give you some observations about seizing the moments and redeeming the time. Go back to the verse. Let me give you 3 observations. You might want to write these down, or you might not. Let me hear it first, preacher. No, that's not the way it works. Okay, number 1, every day comes with its opportunities. That's the first observation. Psalm 90, verse 2, the writer of Psalm says, so teach us to number our days so that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Is that what he said? Now I know numbering to us means to count our days. Okay, how many days do you have left, by the way? You don't know, but I know this, you have less than you had yesterday. They're dwindling. Our days, we don't have as many as we used to, right? No matter how long we live, they're getting less and less and less. But the word to number means, the Hebrew word actually means to weigh out. Like how much sugar are you want a pound, you want a half a pound or whatever. It's to weigh out your days in that sense. And what that means, it means to assign, in a sense, assign purpose or to them, or value to them. I'm gonna say, my days, the days that I have left, are they valuable at all to you? Are you counting them as valuable time that you have? You don't know how much time you have left.
That's right.
For your children, for your spouse, for your family, for your church. You just don't know. But opportunities to effect good for now and for eternity present themselves throughout our life. We know that. We can choose to engage those opportunities, or we can evade those opportunities. We can decide to invest into those opportunities, or we can decide to ignore those opportunities. And that particular opportunity will never, ever, ever come again once it's gone. And there may be others, but that one is gone forever. And can I tell you, folks, eternal rewards hinge on how we use the time we've been given here. Amen. You will give an account of your life. Now, many are willing to give their financial resources, but not as many to strategically invest their life and time for kingdom purposes. Observation number 2 is that some moments are more important than other moments in life. All right. Anybody here like basketball? Oh, we got 2 hands. All right. Maybe 3 or 4. All right. A few of them. Now, right now, we're going through the NBA finals, and it's interesting, right? I watched some of those a little bit. So let me ask you basketball people, what's the most important time in a championship basketball game? I mean, the most important, little section of time. No, not the playoffs. I don't mean that. I mean, in the game, what's the most important moments in the game? The final minute of the game, right?
Which 6 money now?
Exactly. It's always the final minute. How many of you have ever noticed that they can make a final minute last about 40 minutes on TV? Have you ever noticed it?
40.
I mean,
Thunderballing along.
I mean, it's like, whoa, it takes forever and more commercials and stuff. Okay. But it's that last minute because they understand that it's who's got the best score at the very last second that wins the game. And your team could have had a 25-point lead at halftime. Doesn't matter, right? Because if you're not leading when the game ends, you lose.
That's right.
And so they realize it's down to that very final moment. What I'm trying to tell you is some moments are more important than other moments in life. I was doing some research on the computer for this message, and I came across this guy who's a remodeling expert. He goes in and redoes houses and kitchens and bathrooms and stuff for people, okay? Guy's name is Bruce Case. Don't know him, wouldn't know him from Adam. But he wrote this interesting, he writes about his daughter, a little post that he put on his website. It says this. Listen very carefully. This is good for Father's Day, by the way. When she smiles, I melt. When she's down or hurting, I melt. When she hugs me, I melt. I either need a backbone or I'm like every other father of who has an 8-year-old daughter. You remember how precious your little girl was at 8 years old? I mean, they are, right? But then he says, but yet, weekdays are hectic. I have work, she has school, we both come home each day to a list of things that need to get done, homework, taking care of the dog and cat, flute practice, helping with dinner, making lunches. So finding quality time together is precious. That's why my wife and I hold certain times sacred for our family. When we first get home, he says we crave the big hug and smile and try to return them in kind, no matter how difficult or stressful our day has been. Dinner is a time to turn off all electronic gadgets and catch up with one another. A few minutes of playtime after dinner and before lights out can make us both smile and laugh. Bedtime is a warm kiss and the closure for that day. He says not every day is that ideally, but we still reserve these key moments to focus on being a family. And what he's just reminding us is this, that of all of the 24 hours you have tomorrow, some moments, or that you're going to have tomorrow, some moments are going to be more valuable than others. Right? How are you going to spend those times? How are you going to make them a blessing to someone else around you? In my week, by the way, I happen to believe that every church service is an important Kairos time to me. How important is it to you? On June the 9th, and on June the 11th through the 14th, we're going to have some important moments around Lake Pierce Baptist Church. Right. Amen. It will be a Kairos type time to make impressions, first impressions, to meet new parents and their children, to interact with kids who need to see the love of Jesus in their life. They may not be getting enough love at home, by the way. Amen. Moments, these are going to be moments to touch a life, to win a soul. Even if it's a child, right? No, especially if it's a child. Amen. Share our excitement about serving the Lord. Invite moms and dads to church. I'm telling you, folks, there's going to be some moments come Saturday that we need to take advantage of. That's right. Lake Pierce Baptist Church. If you're here working, look for moments. Look for those times. VBS, you see, is a season. Just like a revival or maybe a mission conference or some other special event. They're special moments. They're more important than other times in our life. Number 3, the third observation is this. It takes boldness, courage, and wisdom to seize the opportunities that God brings into your life. Peter and John probably didn't understand what a great opportunity presented itself when they found themselves arrested and put in prison. After they had healed a lame man at the temple gate and they preached to the people in Jerusalem about Jesus and the resurrection, you'll find the story in Acts chapter 3. Yeah, they were arrested for preaching. They went to jail. But out of that incident, by the way, 5,000 people were saved by the grace of God, and the gospel was preached to the high priest, to his family, and to the other rulers of the city. And here's what Peter had to say about that day. In Acts 4 and verse 10, he says this, "Be it known unto you and to all the people of Israel that by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom ye crucified, whom God raised from the dead, even by him doth this man stand here before you whole. This is the stone which was set at naught of you builders, which has become the head of the corner." And I love what Peter said in verse 12. "Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved." Amen. Verse 13 says, "Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, they perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men. They shook their heads, they marveled. And they took knowledge of them that they had been with Jesus." You know what they saw in these men who seized the moment, who redeemed the time that God gave to them that day? I'll tell you what they saw. They saw boldness. That's right. They saw men who stepped out with courage and used wisdom in sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with those that were lost. And as I said, 5,000 people came to know the Lord Jesus Christ in one day. By the way, at the end of that story, the Bible says the officials let them go, and all men glorified God for that which was done. Here's what I know. When we use our time wisely, God gets glorified.
That's right. Amen.
When you use your time for kingdom purposes, God gets glorified. Quickly, I want to give you 3 applications about seizing the moment, redeeming the time. I won't spend much time on each of these, but just very quickly listen. Here's what it means to me to redeem the time. It means, first of all, live every day as if it could be your last. Because it could be your last. Right?
That's right.
As Bob Harrington, the comedian, used to say, he was driving along in Louisiana one day on the interstate, and he got behind this big truck, and on the back of the truck, it said Collins Casket Company. And underneath, there was a picture of a coffin. And underneath the picture of the coffin were these words, "Drive safely, yours might be on this load." So that sobered me right up. No. We don't know when they're going to bring our load of coffin, do we?
That's right.
When it's going to be called for. 1 Corinthians 7:29, one of the paraphrases says this: "The important thing to remember is that our remaining time is very short, and so is our opportunities for doing the Lord's work." Listen, our time is short. Jesus could come again today. Your health could be taken away today. You could be in a traffic accident and lose your life today. You could have a heart attack and die before the service is over. We don't know when our time, and the Proverbs says, "Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth." So, therefore, Christian, I believe it behooves us to live every day with intentionality. It behooves us to live every day with purpose. It behooves us to live every day with urgency, using our time for God wisely. Number 2, live every day as a consistent example to the unsaved. Book of Colossians chapter 4 and verse 5, and we don't have time to turn there this morning, but listen to the verse because it mirrors this verse here. Colossians 4:5. Paul writing to that church, he said, walk in wisdom toward them that are without. That's the lost. Redeeming the time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. What he was saying is, live every day as a consistent example to the lost around you. Be always ready to give an answer when they inquire about your faith, about your life, about what God has done for you. Be ready to witness and share what Jesus means to you with your friends, with people that you meet. 1 Timothy 4:12 says, be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. Listen, every one of you in here, if you're a Christian, you are an example.
That's right.
And you're either a good example or maybe the other kind, right? One or the other. Number 3. Lastly, live every day to accomplish something for Jesus. There's a story about D.L. Moody, and that was his philosophy of life. Do something every day to accomplish something for the Lord. And there's a story that he had in his heart to witness to at least one person every day of his life.
That's right.
And he was constantly witnessing to people wherever he went, whatever he did. One night he found himself, it had been a long day, meetings and different things. He found himself back in his hotel room, and it was late, getting late. It was raining outside. He was getting ready to go to bed, and he thought, I have not witnessed to a single person today. I must go back out and find someone to witness to. So he put back on his suit, and this was in the 1800s, and his hat, and he went outside, did not have an umbrella. He went outside, he looked down the streets of the city that he was in, and there was not a soul in either direction. Pouring down rain. But he said, I've got to find someone who needs to hear about the Lord. At that moment, a man came around the corner with an umbrella. And as he came by where D.L. Moody was, he hopped down. He said, sir, may I share your umbrella with you? And the man said, well, sure. And as he walked around to wherever this other man was going, he began to tell him about Jesus Christ and share his faith with him. And that man stopped there on the street corner under an umbrella and gave his heart to Jesus Christ. D.L. Moody says, now I can go back to my room and go to sleep, rest. Because he had that philosophy, live every day to accomplish something for the Lord. I remember a little plaque on a wall that I saw after I became a Christian as a teenager, and maybe it was at the Christian bookstore in Tampa. It was a plaque, and it said, and you've probably seen this, only one life, 'twill soon be past. What's the rest of it? Only what's done for Christ will last. You ever seen that? It's actually just a part of a more extensive poem that was written by a missionary named C.T. Studd. C.T. Studd came from a rich family. In 1877, he inherited $145,000 from his father. He gave it all away. He gave it to missions. He himself was a